What's going on? My name is Michael and welcome to Fudge Muppet. Today I'm back with even more Starfield for you, and seriously, if you haven't got this game and you love BGS games and especially enjoy games with a heavy amount of role-playing dialogue, I would highly recommend you get it. It's so much better than I expected and I'm so happy to be covering it here on the channel and to begin bringing you tons of guides, builds and so much more. Previously in the video pinned in the comments, I told you 10 really important things I wish I knew before Scott and I played hundreds of hours of Starfield, but there's plenty of extra tips and tricks you should know about that will impact the way you approach things and make your playthrough more effective and enjoyable. The ninth and final thing in this video is something I know a lot of you pirates out there will want to learn, and of course no story spoilers. One neat thing I think will help a lot of people is that if you're ever lost or not exactly sure what way you should be going when you're adventuring through a maze of a space station or even a new city, you can actually bring up your scanner and sometimes a path with arrows will show you the way to your mission objective. It's a bit like the Clairvoyance spell from Skyrim, and thankfully you won't be able to use it all the time. The game generally knows when you should be looking for an objective that's supposed to be a mystery or not obvious to figure out, so if there's no map marker you can't just abuse this to make it take you to the right spot. It is entirely optional of course, and if you're watching this and you've only played previous BGS games from the Fallout or Elder Scrolls series, you might think that this is useless and you won't need it, and I couldn't blame you for thinking that. I personally never needed Clairvoyance in Skyrim, but here's the thing, Starfield is so much bigger than the BGS games you're used to. There are massive environments and places that are super cool to explore, but there's so many of them and you may only visit a certain place once. The cool thing is I can safely say that quality was not sacrificed for scale and size. It's crazy how well they accomplished it all. So in essence, this isn't a just learn your way around Whiterun type of thing. You might dock at a massive ship station but only spend 10 minutes there for one particular mission, and when you're told to go upstairs and there's hallways and turning corridors all around the place, sometimes you might want that little arrow to quickly point out that the stairs are towards the bottom left part of the station. Again, you don't have to use it at all, but it's there if you want it. Speaking of space stations, the main place you'll spend time on in space is your very own ship. On your ship you should have a bed. Anyway, the reason you'll want to utilize this often is that like previous BGS games, there is a well-rested bonus for sleeping, and it increases XP gain by 10%. If you've romanced a companion and then sleep while having them with you, this becomes 15%. I knew about the well-rested bonus and would sometimes rent hotel rooms when I visited cities, but so many times I just completely forgot I could sleep on my ship and completely missed the chance to get more XP before returning to places to turn in quests or simply hop out of my ship to explore a planet and hunt dangerous aliens. It's okay to play Starfield for 20 hours a day, but you need to know that while you might choose to disregard your real-life sleep, you should still make sure to remember to get the sleep that counts. In-game sleep. Next up, the fish. That's right, the fish. You can't go fishing with a rod, but you'll want to go hunt down some big alien fish when you're trying to scan everything on a planet. So you go and orbit a planet, you use the planet scanner and then you touch down on the surface. It may be harsh and unwelcoming. It may be beautiful and inspiring. There may be some Jurassic Park moments playing out before your eyes straight in front of your landing bay, or things may be far more mysterious. There's a range of planets to enjoy exploring, and like I said in the 10 things I wish I knew video, if you go scan everything on planets, you can get XP really fast. Anyway, when you see a little message while scanning saying biome complete, you need to go to the planet in your menu and then click around on the surface of the planet and watch for the percentage that shows up next to the name of the biome. For example, you may not have scanned the final 2 creatures of the 8 on the planet, but you see the message biome complete. You've got all the resources and all the flora, and when you select near your player marker on the planet map, it might say Savannah 100% for where you are, but when you click somewhere else it might say frozen desert 50% or coastal swamp 83%. This means that the animals or natural features you're looking for are in other ecosystems on the same planet you're on. The main culprit here that you need to look for when you get confused are the coastal biomes. They might be at 100%, but the ocean next to them is likely at 0%. So when you zoom in close to the water and select an area there just off the ocean, you'll notice the biome is listed as something like swamp coastal instead of just swamp. I bet you 1,000 credits you need to go here because the final creature to find is a fish. Go to the coastal biome and find a vantage point and spot the ocean. Head over there and scan for the fish that you likely need to complete the planet scanning. Get that juicy XP and sellable planet data. Also, for unlocking the physical traits of the planet, you'll find those at the distant locations on your scanner marked as natural or life signs. If it's something like a structure, it will be some man-made type of place, likely with human inhabitants. Still worth exploring for fun, just not to tick the boxes for scanning. Another tip for those of you who don't feel bad for completely obliterating all the aliens you see is doing exactly that. So we've told you that scanning planets to completion is a really good way to get XP fast, particularly with the skills that assist in cutting down the time it takes. But on top of this, you can actually just blast all the aliens you see to get even more XP. You can scan them and then do it if you want to see them alive up close, though you can actually scan creatures by killing them too. So if they're really far away and you use a sniper, it actually counts as scanning when you kill them. This also helps for those creatures I mentioned in the ocean, like large fish, so you don't have to try swim close, or some small alien creatures that fly high up in the sky. Another reason that going overkill on your beast hunter moments can be a good idea is leveling up ranks. For example, say you're trying to increase your targeting skill in the combat tree to increase accuracy while you're not aiming. You unlock the next rank by killing more enemies without aiming. Sure, you'll make progress in general gameplay, but you can speed things up by running up to a cluster of weak insect creatures and just hip-fire blasting them to shreds. It's also good for your general kill X enemies with X weapon type challenges. You can also get certain resources from their bodies if you're into crafting. Anyway, I feel kinda slack killing alien creatures that are peaceful, but the temptation is there, and I have a feeling the level increasing potential will lead many to the dark side here. The next thing you need to know is to be on the lookout for stat boosting magazines. You can find these all throughout the game, and similarly to the skill books and magazines you know from previous Fallout or Elder Scrolls games, these items boost up your character. The boosts are permanent, and you get them automatically when you pick the item up, so you can also safely know now that it's completely okay to sell them. For example, Grunt Issue 01 gave me 5% more damage to ballistic weapons, and it weighs nothing with a base value of 100. The reason I want you to know about this is in case you decide you don't want to search heavily for loot as you go through different environments. I was very thorough in my first playthrough, in the sense that I'd constantly be looking at every item in the room and what I should or could pick up and so on, so I found quite a few. But if you're not into that and you just run through rooms, you probably won't find them. It's not the end of the world if you don't get them, but I would recommend using the scanner to quickly look through a room, as it will make these magazines a little easier to spot, particularly if it's dark, which plenty of places in Starfield are. Don't forget you have a torch too, and having to use it to see can provide for some epic movie moments. Another thing you need to know before playing is that it's often the most fun to mix it up in your playthrough between doing the handcrafted set content and the more radiant content, including exploration. Things like faction quests, side quests, and the main story are for the most part very well written and a lot of fun. Though as I've said before, I don't recommend rushing the main, but all this generated or randomized content you've heard about is also very good. The exact specifics of how it all works is yet to be determined down to the nitty-gritty details, but basically if you land on a planet and you see a structure that's been placed off in the distance, like an abandoned robotics facility or abandoned research lab or an occupied mine or whatever it may be, these places have turned out to be really cool to visit, even when you've been to many of them before. In fact, I can say that Scott and I have finished all the factions, the main story, and many side quests, and we still have plenty of equally memorable moments from exploring planets and going to these locations. It really does feel as if Bethesda handcrafted places and then strategically use a system that places these locations around the surface of planets in a way that feels right when you land there to explore. They don't feel like some silly randomized mishmash of rooms and areas. Many even have storytelling elements like computers or notes on dead bodies that fit the environment. And as crazy as this may sound, due to the scale of Starfield and having much better technology in the 2020s, many of them feel like far better locations than actual set locations in previous Bethesda games like Fallout 4. Starfield is simply using better tech than BGS has ever used before, and it shows. We were really worried about this, but we want you to know that there isn't any weird imbalance between set mission content and the enjoyment of random exploring. Both are very fun, the locations are really cool, as are the aliens and so on. Sure, you'll see plants and stuff that are very similar or sometimes basically the same once you've landed on many planets, but outside of that, even after hundreds of hours, we're still finding new alien creatures and fun locations to go through, fight the enemies in, and loot. If you're already playing, then you would have experienced it for yourself. Point point being, Starfield has a lot to offer, and I tend to feel like I'm missing out on cool exploring if all I do is gun through mission content, and missing out on cool missions if all I do is explore. So mix it up, do plenty of both, and we think you'll have a better playthrough and lots of fun moments to talk about. Speaking of which, another thing worth knowing is that you can get more rewards for doing basically the same exploration I just encouraged if you use the various mission boards scattered around the game. These boards provide you with the Radiant missions that Starfield has to offer. They can be found in different places like bars or faction hubs, they may be faction related or not, and again, because the world is so fun to explore and because there's still such an abundance of handcrafted content, these missions don't feel like they're taking anything away. They just feel like they add to an extremely fleshed out world with heaps to see and do. In the previous point, I told you that exploring is worth doing, but if you're not too picky about where you explore, you can get extra XP and some more credits for doing a mission board task that could send you to a random planet and have you clear through a base of mercenaries, pirates, or spaces in the process. So in addition to the loot you'd get, the credits you'd get from selling certain loot, and the XP you'd get for kills or picking locks and discovering locations and so on, you'll get additional credits and XP for completing the mission board task itself. Some of these tasks are just easy XP too, like taking cargo on your ship if you've got the space, and simply delivering it to the surface of another city on a different planet. After disliking Radiant missions in previous BGS games, it feels so weird to say that they're actually cool, and they really can be worth doing simply because the exploration is so fun, and they also enhance role-playing. For example, if you're a bounty hunter, you can go hunt down a criminal. If you're a pirate, you can smuggle contraband somewhere or go raid a spaceship carrying goods you can sell. Stuff like that. Listen to my 10 things I wish I knew video if you want to know how to smuggle contraband. And again, just to reiterate the previous point, you want to do a mix of content. If you just went around solely doing mission board content and nothing else, then you're going to feel like you're missing out on everything else the game has to offer, so just intersperse it between all the set content like side quests. And you probably can't help but get wrapped up in many side quests anyway, because so many of the best ones are just stumbled across as you're out visiting new planets. The next thing I really want to tell you is to pay attention to your base weapon damage compared to other new weapons that you find. Yes, if you find a really good weapon like a legendary item with 3 good effects on it, and it's the exact model of weapon you want, you can use it for a long time. I used an explosive shotgun I bought early on at a shop as one of my many weapons for basically my entire playthrough because the explosiveness part of it was still so useful. However, as a lot of time goes by, you'll see generic weapons you've seen before. They're not rare or anything, so just white in tier color, but they'll have different titles like refined or advanced and so on. They might seem easy to ignore because they're not rare, epic, or legendary, but unless you do a side-by-side comparison with your other gear, you might not notice that because you're now a decently higher level, it's actually a fair bit stronger, at least in base damage compared to what you've got. Due to having the right skills for shotgun use and having rare effects on my guns, I was playing with what was technically low base damage shotgun gear for like 20 hours for the levels I was reaching, and then suddenly I switched to a very plain but level appropriate pump action shotgun that did far more damage and started blasting away all my foes easier than ever. The same thing goes for armor. You may get something as a quest reward or during a faction story that is level appropriate and super powerful at the time, and it might be good for another 20 hours if it has particularly useful effects, but eventually it's going to be time to switch it up and move on to something new. So just keep that in mind as you continue to explore space and find new gear. And finally, we come to how to board enemy ships. This is something that every pirate will want to do from a role-playing perspective, although I will say it does take longer than simply blowing them to pieces, but it's still a lot of fun and even gives you the option to steal ships to use or sell. Though for selling ships, you must register them first, which costs almost as much as you'd sell it for, so often it's not worth the effort, and I merely loot the cargo, leave, and blow the ship up once I'm back in my one. But how do you board ships? Well, you'll want to get the targeting control systems skill and use it to target enemy ship engines. Blast the engines with damage until they're disabled and the ship can't move, and then when you're in range, you'll be able to dock and board. I've had rare situations too where there's no gravity in the ship, which is really fun. You can then kill everyone on board and loot it. Now, if you really want to specialize in disabling enemy ships, you'll want to install EM weapons on your ship. Electromagnetic weapons are the best at specifically disabling enemy ship engines without blowing their actual ship up. You'll notice during the targeting that the ship's engines will weaken until they go offline without the actual ship itself taking the kind of structural damage that will fully destroy it. That said, I like to combine EM weapons with ballistic weapons or other weapon types that do regular damage to speed the process along. some. I guess using EM weapons only on some enemies might be better if you want to steal their ship and use it and want to be as delicate as possible, though repairing ships isn't really that expensive anyway, so if you do bang it up a bit much before boarding, you can always fix it. Boarding ships is perfect for pirates, but you can do it to pirates as well if you want to board their ships and terminate them up close. Also, when you take a ship, you can just take it back to a planet, and the ship that you left floating in space will travel back with you. Do subscribe if I've helped you and you're excited to get more Starfield content in your life. We're going to be covering the game for a long time to come with loads of guides, builds, and more. Hit like if you want to support videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I'm going back to play more Starfield.